I took the night job at the freight yard because after the accident, I stopped trusting anything that sounded still in the dark. Before that, I had worked rail jobs long enough to think I knew when a problem could wait and when it could not. Then I signed off on a brake line that should have been taken out of service, and later that same night, a young brakeman died under a moving cut of cars. Nobody said it was all my fault. They did not need to. I knew where I had been careless, and that was enough. By the time I got to Montana, I was living out of a duffel bag and taking work wherever people needed a body more than they needed a clean story. The yard sat outside town under sodium lights and diesel haze, with long black tracks running into the dark and freight cars standing so still they almost looked planted there. I remember thinking it looked like honest work. Then I saw a sealed boxcar sitting on a track my paperwork said was empty. The yard was on the edge of town, far enough out that the lights looked separate from everything else. Sodium lamps over the service tracks, red markers in the distance, a few idling locomotives throwing low diesel noise into the cold. The rest was steel, gravel, and dark. Lines of boxcars and hoppers sat across the ballast in long cuts that looked dead still until the wind moved through them and made the metal click somewhere far down the line. I parked beside a row of pickups with block heaters hanging out front and sat there a second with my hands on the wheel. Rail yards always look bigger at night than they do in daylight. More room for mistakes, more room for movement you hear before you understand. I grabbed my duffel, got out into the Montana cold, and started toward the yard office with that old bad feeling already awake in the middle of my chest. The office was a low building with dirty windows, fluorescent lights, and a break room that smelled like burnt coffee and wet gloves. A radio chattered somewhere in the back. A wall clock ticked louder than it should have. The night foreman was a man named Harlan Pike, late 50s maybe, heavy coat, lined face, railroad posture. He had the look of somebody who had spent most of his life outdoors around moving steel and no longer wasted energy on explaining the obvious. He checked my name off a clipboard, looked at me once, and asked how long since I had worked a yard. I told him not long enough to forget anything useful. He said that was good, because forgetting was what got people hurt out there. Then he handed me a reflective vest, a radio, and a folded switch list for the night. His voice stayed flat and practical, but I had the clear feeling he was watching how I reacted to sounds outside, especially every time a coupler hit somewhere in the dark. He walked me out along the nearest service road and showed me the shape of the yard before he gave me any real work. Main lead, service track, 2 storage tracks, outbound cut, bad order track, fuel point, mostly routine freight, grain, lumber, mixed freight, a few sealed boxcars, some tankers sitting cold. The ground under our boots was frozen ballast and old grease. Every few seconds the yard made a small sound somewhere, a metal tap, a wheel settling, wind slipping through brake rigging. Harlan pointed out the safe routes, the switch stands, the blue flag area, and the places nobody walked alone if they could help it. Then he stopped near track 6 and said the same thing every railman says in one form or another. Never trust stillness unless you watched it happen. That line landed harder on me than he knew. Out in the dark, a coupler slammed hard enough to echo across the yard, and my shoulders tightened before I could hide it. Back in the office, Harlan gave me the yard rules that were not on any official safety poster. He did it the same way men hand over practical knowledge they do not expect management to sign off on. No speech, no build-up, just a folded sheet from the desk drawer. The first rule said, If a cut of cars came in one car longer than the switch list showed, I was not to recount it out loud. Mark the extra car and wait for confirmation. The second said, if a sealed boxcar appeared with no paperwork, I was not to break the seal, even if I heard movement inside. Log the car number exactly as written and leave it where it sat until sunrise. The third said that if I heard a locomotive horn from the service track after 2 in the morning, I was not to look toward the cab. Stop where you are and wait for it to finish. I read that page twice before I asked who had written it. Harlan said enough men had. There were 2 more rules at the bottom. Never walk between parked cars in the dark unless you watched them stop with your own eyes. If you did not see them stop, go around the end of the track. And if the same car number showed up twice in one shift on 2 different tracks, do not report the second sighting over the radio. Write it down by hand and keep working. That last one bothered me the most. The others sounded like rough yard scents with something extra folded into them. That one sounded like a man being told not to say what he had seen. I asked Harlan what happened if the duplicate number was attached to an outbound cut. He looked past me toward the window, where the yard lights made the glass look black from the inside. Then he said if that happened, I was to trust my notebook more than the radio, and keep my mouth shut until morning. He said it the way another man might say, watch your footing on ice. The first part of the shift was real work, which helped. Handbrake checks, a switch alignment verify, 1 bad order note on a hopper door, and a walk along track 4 to confirm the seal numbers on a shortcut that was supposed to stay parked until daylight. Normal rail work has its own rhythm if you let it. Check, walk, listen, write, move on. For a while, I started to settle into that. The cold bit through the gloves. Diesel hung low in the air. Somewhere far across the yard, a locomotive idled with that heavy, uneven sound big engines make when they are waiting on orders that are none of their business. I kept my notes clean and my radio low. Then I reached the end of a cut on track 4, counted the last car twice in my head, and realized the switch list in my hand was short by 1. Not maybe, not if you counted a coupler wrong. 1 full extra car standing in the dark where the paperwork said there should be empty track. I stopped walking and checked the list again under my flashlight. Same count as before, same track number, same cut notation. I looked up and ran the count once in my head from the lead car back, slow and careful. Same result, 1 too many. The rule sheet came back to me right away. If a cut comes in one car longer than your switch list shows, do not recount it out loud. Mark the extra car and wait for confirmation. So I did not say the number to myself again. I just walked closer to the last car and took down the reporting marks by flashlight. It was a sealed boxcar. Dark paint, road dirt across the lower half, old scrape marks near the door. Nothing dramatic about it, except that it did not belong there. No matching paperwork tag clipped to the side ladder, no fresh chalk mark, no place for it on the list. The steel seal on the door looked unbroken. I wrote the number in my notebook and felt a knock come from inside, soft and spaced, like somebody using knuckles instead of a tool. I did not jump. That was the strange part. The sound hit something older in me than surprise. Yardmen hear things in steel all night long and learn to sort them by instinct. Settling metal, slack, wind, ice, rodents in old grain dust. This was not any of those. 3 knocks, even and human, from about chest height behind the sealed door. I stood there with the flashlight fixed on the latch and waited for it to happen again. The cold made my nose ache. Diesel drifted somewhere behind me. The yard stayed otherwise quiet. Then the knocks came a second time. Same spacing, same height. Rule 2 was plain enough. Do not break the seal, even if you hear movement inside. Log the car number exactly as written and leave it on its track until sunrise. So I wrote the number again to make sure I had it right, backed off the car, and walked straight to the office without saying anything over the radio. Halfway there, I looked across the yard and saw that same boxcar standing at the end of a different cut on track 6. I stopped hard enough to feel it in my knees. Track 6 ran parallel to track 4 with a service road between them. The sealed boxcar was there now. Same dark paint, same scrape marks near the door, same number panel catching the yard light at the same angle. I looked back toward track 4. The end of that cut was a hopper now. No boxcar. No signs of movement. No engine work. No switch throw. Nothing that explained how a sealed car had changed tracks without half the yard knowing about it. I crossed to track 6 and checked the reporting marks again by flashlight. Same number, same seal, same car. The rule sheet in my pocket suddenly felt less like yard superstition and more like a set of instructions written by men who had already lost arguments with the night. I wrote the second sighting down by hand exactly as the rule said. Then I kept my mouth shut and went back to work, even though from then on, every time I heard steel click in the dark, part of me was waiting for that car to show up somewhere closer. By the time I finished the round and came back into the office, I had gone over the second sighting in my head enough times to know I was not dealing with a bad angle or tired counting. Same reporting marks, same seal, same scrape near the door, same car. Harlan was at the desk with the radio turned low and a legal pad open in front of him. I told him I had one unlisted sealed boxcar on track 4, then the same number again on track 6. I kept my voice level and did not say the number out loud. He looked up right away at that. Then he slid the legal pad toward me and told me to write both tracks, both times, and nothing else. I did. He read it once, tore the page off, folded it in half, and put it in his coat pocket. Then he said the one thing I had hoped he would not say. He said I had done the right thing by not using the radio. I asked him if that car was supposed to be in the yard at all. He said, not on paper. I asked if it had shown up before. He said enough times that men had stopped pretending it was a paperwork problem. Then he told me to keep working my route and leave the sealed car where it was, whichever track it decided to be on when I next saw it. That wording bothered me. Not whichever track it had been switched to, whichever track it decided to be on. The rest of the yard stayed busy enough to make the conversation feel unreal for a while. A local engine shoved a shortcut onto the outbound lead. A hopper door got tagged bad order. Somebody on the far end of the yard laughed over the radio at something I could not hear clearly. Normal work sounds, normal steel, but every time I turned my head, I was looking for that boxcar without meaning to. Men who work around heavy equipment develop patterns fast. Once one object feels wrong, the whole night starts arranging itself around where you last saw it. About 40 minutes later, I found it again. This time on the far end of track 2, behind 2 covered hoppers that had not been there when I walked the line earlier. I checked the number by flashlight before I let myself believe it. Same reporting marks, same seal, same scrape marks near the door hardware. The side of the car was cold enough to burn through my glove when I touched it. I did not mean to touch it. That was just the body getting ahead of the mind for a second, the way it does when you are trying to prove something is ordinary. The steel felt wrong. Not colder than Montana cold. Colder than the air around it, like the car had been standing somewhere else and brought that temperature with it. I stepped back at once. No knocking this time. No movement. Just a sealed, unlisted boxcar sitting where my notes said it should not be. I wrote the new track number down by hand and kept walking, because by then the notebook felt more useful than any explanation I could have asked for. The yard did what bad places always do after they show you something impossible. It gave me 15 minutes of normal work so my own mind could start arguing against what I had seen. I checked handbrakes on a parked cut. I verified a switch alignment under a weak service lamp. I stood with another worker named Beasley while he cursed a frozen latch on a toolbox and told me the motel off the highway served the worst breakfast in 3 counties. He was younger than Harlan and older than me by a few years, broad-built, tired eyes, railroad family by the sound of him. Normal enough that I almost asked him about the sealed boxcar right there. Then I remembered the 5th rule. If the same car number appears twice in one shift on 2 different tracks, do not report the second sighting over the radio. Write it down by hand and keep working. The rule did not forbid talking in person, but by then I understood something close to it. The less shape I gave the car in language, the less real it seemed to get. It was Beasley who brought it up first anyway. We were walking the service road back toward the office when he nodded toward track 2 without slowing down and said if I was new enough to still be curious, I should get over it fast. I asked what he meant. He said, every yard has one thing on night shift that does not behave right, and if you try to be the man who straightens it out, the yard usually collects payment. That sounded like the kind of line men use when they want to pass off an old fear as rough wisdom, but he was not putting on a show for me. His eyes stayed on the ballast in front of his boots. I asked how long the sealed car had been turning up. He said longer than he had been at this yard, and probably longer than Harlan too. Then he asked if I had heard it yet. I said, heard what? He gave me a quick look and said from inside, like I was already answering the wrong question. I did not answer him. He took that as enough and let the subject die on its own, which told me he was not trying to scare the new guy for sport. That mattered. Men do that in yards, especially on night shift, but this was not that tone. This was the tone of somebody checking how far into a thing another man had already walked. We split off at the fuel point, and I headed toward track 2 again, because by then I wanted to know whether the car stayed where it was once noticed, or only when unwatched. The track was empty when I got there, not moved down the line. Empty. The 2 covered hoppers remained. Ballast looked undisturbed. Couplers sat still. My notebook said I had written the second sighting less than 20 minutes earlier. I stood there with my flashlight low and useless in my hand, feeling the old accident fear start to build in my body, the kind that comes from knowing something heavy has changed place and not hearing when it happened. I went around the end of the cut on instinct rather than walking between the cars. That detail mattered later. At the time, it only felt like habit mixed with nerves. Rule 4 said never walk between parked cars in the dark unless you saw them stop with your own eyes. If you did not witness the stop, go around the end of the track. I had seen these hoppers standing there, but I had not seen the whole cut come to rest. That difference had started seeming important to me, so I took the long way around and came out onto the other side facing track 3. The sealed boxcar was there, maybe 30 yards off, standing alone on a short dead-end spur that had been clear earlier in the night. No engine, no crew, no fresh wheel noise, just the same unlisted car, sitting by itself as if it had been placed there for me to notice cleanly. This time the knocks came before I got close enough to read the number. 3 of them, patient and spaced, from inside the dark steel. I stayed where I was and listened. The wind had dropped some, which made the sounds in the yard carry harder. A switch stand creaked somewhere behind me. A locomotive idled low on the service track. Then the knocks came again. Same rhythm as before. Not frantic, not weak, just present. I thought about drifters. I thought about animals. I thought about every reasonable explanation a man can reach for when he has worked too many cold hours and does not want the world widening under his boots. But railmen know the difference between panic noise and deliberate sound. This was deliberate. Rule 2 was plain enough. If a sealed boxcar appears with no paperwork, do not break the seal. Even if you hear movement inside, log the car number exactly as written and leave it on its track until sunrise. So I moved in only far enough to confirm the marks by flashlight, wrote them down again, and backed off. Halfway through the number, I realized one of the reporting digits matched a condemned car from the yard where the brakeman died. That stopped me colder than the knocking had. Rail people remember numbers the way other people remember faces. Not every number, not forever, but the ones tied to bad nights stay put in the mind. The condemned car from North Dakota had been taken out after the accident, tagged and documented, and stripped from active work. I knew that. I also knew one of the middle digits on the sealed boxcar matched the sequence from that car exactly. Close enough to hit my nerves, not enough to prove anything. I wrote the full number in my notebook this time, then went back to the office and checked the old switch list copies stacked near the printer. Nothing. No record for that car. No inbound notation. No hold note. No bad order paperwork. Harlan came in while I was still flipping pages. I showed him the notebook entry without saying the number aloud. He looked at it, looked at me, and asked if the knocks had started before or after I got close. When I told him before, he nodded like that made a difference he did not want to explain yet. A little after 2 in the morning, I was on the service road between the office and the outer tracks when a locomotive horn sounded from the service track. One long, low blast that seemed too close and too clean for how little movement the yard was supposed to have at that hour. The sound cut straight through me. Rule 3 came back at once. If you hear a locomotive horn from the service track after 2 a.m., do not look toward the cab. Stop where you are and wait until the sound finishes. So I stopped, boots planted in frozen ballast, radio quiet at my hip, eyes fixed on the ground just ahead of me. The horn sounded again, shorter this time, then once more. While it blew, I heard something else layered underneath it, a metal dragging sound, and the faint clank of couplers taking slack somewhere out in the dark. When the last note faded, the yard went still again. I kept my eyes down another few seconds before lifting them. The service track ahead of me was empty, but off to my left, on the outbound cut, the sealed boxcar was coupled in 3 cars from the rear. I stood there, looking at the outbound cut long enough to make myself cold in places the coat should have covered. The sealed boxcar sat 3 cars from the rear, dark paint under sodium light, same scrape near the door, same number panel, same bad feeling in my chest. I had not seen an engine move it. I had not heard a switch throw. I had not even looked toward the service track while the horn sounded, which meant the yard had managed to change shape around me without giving me a clean point where it happened. That bothered me more than if I had watched it roll. Movement you can witness still belongs to the world. Movement you only discover after the fact belongs to something else. I took out the notebook and wrote the new track location by flashlight, keeping the number off my radio and off my tongue. Then I looked down the cut and realized something worse. The outbound paperwork in my pocket was now short by one car in a different place. Back in the office, I laid the switch list on the desk and checked it against my notes while Harlan watched without interrupting. The cut was still the same total length on paper, but the order had changed. The sealed boxcar had not just attached itself to an outbound line. It had displaced something. One hopper number I had copied earlier from the rear half of the cut was gone from the sequence completely, as if the yard had made room instead of simply adding weight. Harlan read my notes, rubbed a thumb once across his mouth, and said that was better than the other possibility. I asked what the other possibility was. He said sometimes the cut stayed one longer, and men started counting it aloud without meaning to. I asked what happened then. He said usually nothing good, and because he was Harlan, that was all I got. Then he told me to keep walking the yard and use the notebook for anything involving that car. No radio, no second opinions, no trying to make the paperwork catch up before dawn. The rest of the yard was busy enough to stay believable, which was part of what made the sealed car so effective. A 2-unit local shoved covered hoppers down a lead. A switch crew argued in flat-tired voices about a handbrake that should have been set tighter. Somebody on the far end dropped a wrench hard enough to wring steel 3 tracks over. I did my work and kept my mind inside it as much as I could. That is one of the few useful things guilt teaches you, how to keep moving while a bad thought keeps pace beside you. Around 2:25, I walked the service road past the outer tracks and saw Beasley standing by a switch stand with his head lowered and both hands on his knees like he had just come off a run. When I got close, he straightened too fast and asked whether I had looked toward the service track horn. I said no. He held my eyes a second longer than normal and said good. Then he added that Morales had looked last winter and quit before sunrise. I asked what Morales had seen, and Beasley gave me the kind of answer men use when the details matter less than the result. He said Morales claimed there was an engine sitting cold on the service track with no marker lights and no exhaust, and a man in the cab who had been dead 10 years at another yard. Then Morales made the mistake of waving at it like you wave at any engineer you think knows you. After that, every radio call on his shift started coming through in the dead man's voice. He lasted 4 more hours, then turned in his vest and drove out without collecting his last check. Beasley said it all in the same tone he might have used to explain a frozen airline, not because he thought I would enjoy the story, but because he believed the summary was practical. I asked whether he believed Morales. He looked out across the tracks toward the dark service line and said belief had stopped being the useful part of the night a long time ago. At 2:41, I found the sealed boxcar uncoupled again. It sat by itself on a short storage spur near the fuel point. No engine, no fresh wheel marks in the frost, no switch reason for it to be there. I walked only close enough to confirm the number and the seal, then stopped. The knocks started almost at once. Same 3 knocks, same chest height, same patient spacing. There are sounds that ask for rescue and sounds that ask for witness. This was neither. It sounded like something marking time from the inside. I wrote the location in my notebook and was stepping back when I saw a tag hanging from the side ladder below the number panel. Fresh brake inspection card, yellow stock, stiff enough that the wind had not worked it much yet. I should not have known the handwriting on it from that distance, but I did. It looked close enough to mine to make the skin pull tight at the back of my neck. I did not touch the tag. I read only the first line. Brake condition accepted for movement. That line hit me harder than the horn, the knocks, or the car changing tracks. It was too close to the exact kind of language I had used on the bad night in North Dakota. Not the same words, but the same permission inside them. Good enough. Move it now. Fix it later. I stood there with the flashlight on the card and felt the whole old accident come back in pieces I never asked for. The wet shine on steel. The sudden shout over the radio. A cut rolling farther than expected because weight does not care about regret. The card hanging on the sealed car moved once in the wind and tapped the side ladder softly. Then the knocks came again from inside, and this time they were answered by a metal sound from farther down the spur, like another car taking slack. I backed away from the sealed boxcar without turning around and went straight to the office, because for the first time since I arrived, the yard no longer felt like it was showing me something. It felt like it was building a night for me specifically. Harlan listened without interrupting while I described the yellow brake card and the line written across it. I did not tell him the words looked like mine. Men know when something has gone personal without needing the most embarrassing part stated out loud. He opened one of the lower desk drawers, took out a thin stack of copied incident pages, and slid them over. "Read only the ones marked in red pen," he said. The first page was from 7 years earlier. Night mechanic reported seeing blue flag removed from car he personally set. Second page. Carmen heard deceased foreman call his name from sealed reefer. Third page. Duplicate brake tag appeared on unlisted car with inspector's own initials. I read that last one twice. The note below it had been underlined by hand. Yard does not invent the weakness. It uses the one already carried in. I sat there with the papers in my hand and understood the difference between this place and the checkpoint or any other official nightmare a man could imagine. This yard did not need your answers. It needed your habits. That changed how I moved through the rest of the shift. I trusted the notebook more. I trusted my route less. Every switch stand, every parked cut, every idle locomotive became a thing I checked against what I had personally seen instead of what should have been true on paper. Rule 4 started making more sense in that light. Never walk between parked cars in the dark unless you watched them stop with your own eyes. The danger was not only physical, though that part was real enough. The danger was assuming stillness had a history you could trust. Around 3:05, I was cutting across toward the outer service lane when I caught myself about to slip between two standing hoppers to save time. I stopped with one boot already on the ballast shoulder and took the long way around instead. When I came out the far side, I saw why the rule existed. The hoppers were not coupled to what I thought they were. On the other side of them sat the sealed boxcar, close enough that if I had walked between, I would have stepped out almost touching its door. I froze there in the cold, with the flashlight hanging at my side, and listened. No knocks this time. No wind either. The whole track sat still in a way that felt prepared. Then, from somewhere farther down the line, a man said my name in a voice so ordinary it nearly worked. Not shouted, not distorted. Just a man trying to get another man's attention in the yard without sounding urgent. I knew that voice, not because it belonged to someone living nearby, but because it belonged to the brakeman who died in North Dakota. He had sounded like that the whole week before the accident, young enough to still say my name like I knew more than he did. The sealed boxcar gave one soft knock from inside, right after the voice. Then another. I did not answer. I did not step closer. I backed away the same way I had from bad dogs and bad steel, keeping my eyes on the car until the next switch lamp came into view. By the time the horizon started thinking about dawn, the yard had settled into a tired gray quiet that made everything from the night feel half stupid and half permanent. The sealed boxcar was gone from the service lane when I checked one last time. The outbound cut had left with no extra car visible on the rear count as it passed the signal, and yet when I went back through my notebook in the office, the numbers were all still there. 6 separate sightings on 4 tracks, same reporting marks every time. Harlan read over the pages, then asked me one question. Had I answered anything from the car or the dark? I said no. He nodded once and told me that was why I was still only being shown the yard instead of being asked to join it. I wanted him to explain that sentence. Instead, he took my notes, copied the car number onto a small square of paper, and slid it back to me. "Keep this off-site," he said. Then he added that if I ever saw the same number at another yard, I was not to treat it like a coincidence. I slept badly that day and woke with the sound of couplers in my head, the kind of hard metal hit that makes your body tense before your mind catches up. The motel room was warm and plain and nowhere near the yard, but the feeling came with me anyway. That was the thing I had forgotten about railroad work after the accident. Steel gets into your nerves. Once it does, distance stops meaning much. I sat on the edge of the bed, looked at the square of paper Harlan had given me with the boxcar number on it, and tried to decide whether carrying it off-site had been a warning or a test. By the time I drove back out that night, the Montana sky had gone clear and cold, stars sharp over the yard lights. The place looked almost calm from the road. That made it worse. Bad yards and bad men both look their cleanest right before they prove what they are. Harlan was alone in the office when I came in, writing on a legal pad with the radio turned almost all the way down. He looked up, checked my face once, and asked if I had brought the paper back. I said yes. He held out his hand without comment, and I gave it to him. He folded it once, put it in the same lower drawer as the copied incident pages, and told me there was one more thing I needed to know before we went any farther. He said the sealed car was worst on nights when a man had something fresh enough in him to answer with habit instead of thought. I asked what counted as fresh. He said guilt did, anger did, shame did. So did the need to make a bad night come out differently than it had before. That last one hit the hardest because it was the one I had spent nearly a year pretending was not running half my life. Men tell themselves they want peace when what they really want is a second chance with better timing. The shift started clean, which by then I understood to mean the yard was giving me room to settle in before it moved anything. A switch crew worked the east lead. 2 units came in on the fuel point and sat there breathing diesel into the cold. I checked handbrakes on a short lumber cut, logged a bad order note on a hopper ladder, and kept the notebook in my inside coat pocket where I could reach it fast. Every ordinary task made the strange parts sharper. That was the yard's best trick. It never asked me to leave reality behind. It only changed 1 or 2 pieces at a time and let the rest of the world stay useful. Around 12:50, I found a fresh brake tag clipped to a covered hopper on track 5. Yellow card, same thick block handwriting as the one on the sealed boxcar the night before. The line across it read brakes, accepted for movement. It was not my writing. It only knew how to lean that way. I left the tag where it was and wrote the hopper number in my notebook instead. That was a change in me. A year earlier, I would have pulled the card, checked the air, corrected the paperwork, fixed the problem with my hands, because hands are easier than fear. The yard was teaching me a worse skill, and maybe a safer one. How to refuse contact with things that looked enough like work to get you involved. About 10 minutes later, the radio cracked once, and a voice I knew too well said, "Nate, you clear on the rear." It was the brakeman from North Dakota. Same age in the voice, same slightly careful tone, like he never wanted to sound greener than he was. The yard did not even bother disguising it anymore. I froze, with one hand on a switch stand, and looked at the ballast instead of around me. The radio hissed softly and repeated the line. I said nothing. After a few seconds, the channel cleared on its own, and from somewhere out in the dark came the soft clank of couplers taking slack where no engine had moved. That was when I understood the copied incident pages better. The yard was not trying to make me believe in ghosts. It was trying to make me answer in the language I already trusted. A radio call, a brake tag, a routine question from a young brakeman on the rear of a cut. All of it built to catch the body before the mind had time to object. I went back to the office and told Harlan what the radio had said. He nodded once, wrote the time on his legal pad, and said the voice part usually got worse after the brake tags started showing up. I asked why. He said because by then the yard had your work habits sorted. Then he gave me another page from the old copies, one with half the top cut off. The useful line was in the middle. If you hear your own bad night coming back in work language, do not correct it. That line felt more honest than anything official I had read in a year. Most men get hurt twice, once in the real event, and once trying to fix it after it has already become memory. At 1:37, the service track horn sounded again. One long, low blast that carried across the yard like it had all the room in the world to travel. I was near the fuel point this time, with the open dark of the service line off to my right. Rule 3 came back, before thought did. Do not look toward the cab. Stop where you are and wait until the sound finishes. So I stopped, boots planted, eyes down, hands still. The horn blew a second time, shorter now. While it sounded, I heard another noise under it. Slow wheel movement on steel, not fast, not shoved, just a car rolling under its own weight, somewhere it had no business moving. Then a third horn note, and during that one, I heard a man laughing softly from the direction of the service track. Not a lot of laughter, just enough to sound like someone who had seen another man do exactly what he expected. When the sound ended, I kept my eyes down a few seconds longer. Then I looked up and saw the sealed boxcar sitting on the bad order track 20 yards ahead of me. The bad order track had been empty when I checked it less than an hour earlier. Now the sealed car sat there alone, dark side turned toward me, yellow brake tag hanging from the side ladder beneath the reporting marks. I walked only close enough to confirm the number. Same car, same seal, new tag. The paper moved lightly in the wind and flashed the writing at me. Reject for service, hold for daylight inspection. That should have reassured me. It did the opposite. The card was now arguing with the one from earlier, as if the yard were testing which version of procedure I trusted more. Move it now or hold it back. Good enough or not safe. Every bad decision I had ever made around steel lived somewhere between those two phrases. I did not touch the tag. I wrote the track and time in my notebook and backed off. The knocks from inside the car started only after I turned away. 3 of them, then a pause, then 3 more. as if it knew exactly how much sound it took to pull me half around. I kept walking and did not give it the turn of my shoulders it wanted. That felt less like courage than self-control of the ugliest kind, the kind built from knowing your own reflexes are compromised. Beasley caught up with me near the service road and asked if I had heard the horn. I said yes. He asked if I had looked. I said no. He blew air through his teeth and said that was smart, because the first time he looked, he had spent the rest of the shift hearing switch orders from a conductor who had been dead since 2009. He said it casually, but not lightly. Then he told me something Harlan had not. He said the sealed car did not always show up sealed. Sometimes it came through as a reefer or a hopper or even a battered tanker. But if you tracked it long enough by number or by the feel of it, you learned it was the same thing wearing a different job. That mattered. It meant the boxcar was just the shape it had chosen for me. That idea stayed with me while I worked the west side of the yard, because once it was in my head, other details started lining up behind it. The brake tags, the radio calls, the car moving in a way that matched my exact kind of guilt instead of some general railroad fear. Around 2:20, I found another yellow card clipped to a standing hopper, and this one really did have something close to my own hand in it. Not identical, close enough to feel insulting. The line on the tag read "Rear movement acceptable." I stared at that for a second too long, because rear movement was the phrase that should have gotten more attention on the night the brakeman died. Too much movement accepted too early. Too much faith that steel would settle where men expected it to. I pulled my notebook out, copied the hopper number, and stepped back. That was when I heard my own voice from across the track, calm and practical and tired, saying, "Leave it. It will hold." I knew that sentence. I had said it once for real. The yard had saved it for me. The rest of the night narrowed after that, not in what physically happened, but in how personal the yard's choices became. It was no longer just showing me an extra car or a bad count. It was feeding me my own weak points in railroad language and waiting to see which one I would answer. Near 3 in the morning, I reached the outer service lane and saw the sealed boxcar again, this time coupled into a short parked cut beside 2 tank cars and a reefer. I had not seen that cut stop. Rule 4 should have been enough on its own to keep me clear. Still, I found myself drifting toward the gap between the reefer and the tank car, because the shortest way to the boxcar was through. I stopped with one boot on the ballast shoulder and looked down. Fresh wheel shine on the rail. Not old, not settled. The cut had moved recently, maybe minutes ago, and I had not witnessed any of it. I went around the end instead. When I came out on the far side, the gap I had almost stepped through was gone. The cars had drawn together, silent as breath. That near miss at this gap changed the whole shape of the night for me. Up to then, I had still been treating the yard like a bad place with one wrong car in it. After that, I understood something worse. The car was not the only problem. The yard could shift small pieces of itself around that car, just enough to make a man take the wrong shortcut at the wrong moment. If I had gone between those cars instead of around, I would have stepped into a space that did not stay open long enough to trust. Back in the office, I told Harlan exactly where it had happened and what I had seen when I came around the end. He listened, wrote the time down as 3:04 a.m., and said that was how it started for most of the missing men in the old notes. Not the car door, not the horn, the shortcut. He said bad steel did not need you brave. It only needed you in a hurry. He finally let me read a thicker stack of copied pages after that. Most had names cut off and dates blacked over, but the pattern was still there if you knew what you were looking at. Men hearing their own voices over the radio, men finding tags in handwriting that leaned toward theirs, men seeing the same car under different paint, on different tracks, with different reporting marks that still felt somehow identical. One page had a line underlined twice in red pen. Do not verify the car by opening it, counting it aloud, or giving its number to moving equipment over radio. Another said, the car strengthens when a worker tries to place it correctly inside the yard. That was the first sentence that felt like a real explanation. Not a full one, but enough. The yard was not asking me to complete a process the way the checkpoint had. It was asking me to witness and confirm movement that should never have been real in the first place. That difference mattered. It changed the rule set from superstition into something almost mechanical. Do not count it aloud, because spoken count gives it shape. Do not break the seal, because opening the door makes it a car with contents instead of a sealed thing that does not belong. Do not use the radio, because radio language puts it inside active yard movement. The horror of it was that the logic made sense, not in any official world, but in the closed, ugly logic of the yard I was standing in. Once I understood that much, another detail snapped into place too. The car was worst for men who already carried guilt, because guilt makes you want to verify, correct, and repair. It makes you lean toward the thing you should leave alone. Around 1:12 a.m., while I was still reading, 3 soft knocks came from outside the office wall. Not loud, not hidden, just enough to make both me and Harlan look at the same dark window. We did not go out right away. That was another lesson I had been learning there. That instant reaction was often the first mistake. Harlan waited maybe 30 seconds, then shut the copied notes back into the drawer and told me to come with him. We stepped outside into hard cold and crossed toward the office side track, where no cut had been parked an hour earlier. The sealed boxcar sat there alone under the yard light, close enough that the steel seal on the door gave a dull little shine. No engine, no fresh coupling sounds, no switch reason for it to be there. The yellow tag on the side ladder was gone now. In its place was a white chalk mark low on the panel, a number written the way rail crews sometimes mark temporary checks in the field. I bent the light down enough to read it. It was the same car number Harlan had sent me off-site with the night before, except for one middle digit. The digit from the condemned North Dakota car was back. I wrote the new number in my notebook without saying it. Harlan watched my hand, then asked whether I recognized anything in the sequence. I said yes. He nodded once and said that was why the yard had stopped bothering to hide what route it was taking with me. Then the knocks came from inside the car again, closer together this time, not frantic, not weak, just more certain. Harlan said, "Do not stand square to the door," and stepped back first himself. I copied him without asking why. The rule sheet had never mentioned posture, but by then I trusted yard habits more than paper. A second later, I understood. From farther down the side of the car, where I had not noticed it before, came a sound like somebody dragging a palm slowly down the steel from the inside. Not clawing, not pounding, just a slow, deliberate scrape that ended at shoulder height and stopped there, as if whatever was inside had found exactly where we were standing. We left the car where it was and went back to work, because that was the only safe answer the yard ever seemed to respect. Around 1:49 a.m., a local engine crew called in to ask whether Track 7 was clear for a short shove. Harlan checked the board, checked the physical line through the office window, and said yes. Then, before he keyed the radio, he looked at me and said if the unlisted car showed on 7 after the move, I was to write it down and say nothing. The shove took less than 5 minutes. 2 hoppers and a reefer rolled past under the lights, couplers stretching and closing softly in the cold. When the movement ended and the yard settled, the sealed boxcar was standing 4 cars in on track 7, where neither of us had seen it go. No radio call had moved it. No switcher had shoved enough cars to hide it. It was simply there now, joined to the cut, as if it had always belonged on the rear half. I wrote the track down in my notebook and felt more tired than frightened. That tiredness was dangerous. Fear at least keeps a man alert to his edges. Tiredness starts offering bargains. It tells you one look would help, one closer pass, one check of the seal, one quick recount just to calm yourself down. Around 2:08 a.m., the service track horn sounded again, low and long through the dark. I stopped where I was, eyes on the ballast, and waited it out like the rules said. During the second horn, I heard my own voice from somewhere off to the left, the same tired, flat voice I had used in North Dakota at the end of that fatal shift. It said the exact sentence I had dreaded since the brake tags started leaning toward me. It said, "We can move it one more time." My hands went cold inside the gloves. That sentence was the hinge the whole old night had turned on. Not shouted in panic, not said under pressure. Said calmly, because calm is what men trust most before steel proves them wrong. I did not answer. I did not look toward the service track. I stood there until the horn finished and the yard went quiet again, then counted 5 more breaths before raising my eyes. The service line was empty. The outbound cut on 7 was not. The sealed boxcar had moved again. This time, one position closer to the head end. That was the pattern I had been avoiding naming. It was not only appearing, it was working its way forward inside active cuts, as if trying to reach the point where a crew would have to account for it before releasing movement off yard limits. I went straight to Harlan with that, and found him already looking at the board with the same conclusion on his face. The outbound cut on track 7 was scheduled to leave before dawn, around 4:35 a.m. If the sealed car stayed in it, somebody on daylight or on the road crew side would eventually have to count, call, or verify it unless we found a way to let the train take the problem out without making it more real here first. That was when Harlan said the thing I think he had been holding back since my first night. He said the car was never most dangerous when it stayed parked. It got dangerous when a worker decided he could protect the yard by correcting it, open the door, recount the cut, radio the duplicate number, stop the outbound movement. All of those felt responsible. All of them had made things worse in the old reports. The only result anyone had ever trusted, he said, came from letting the extra car go without giving it the formal shape it wanted first. He said that with the kind of bitterness men use when a lesson cost more than the words are worth. Then he added that the road crews usually reported the departing cut one car, shorter past the first signal than it had been leaving the yard. I asked where that left the car. He said, not gone, just not ours anymore. Outside, from track 7, 3 slow knocks came through the dark, like something answering its own name. We spent the next hour preparing for the outbound release, the way men prepare for any dangerous move, by doing all the ordinary parts even more carefully. Handbrakes checked on the cars that belonged, switch lined correctly, paperwork kept to the listed cut only, No spoken recount beyond what the actual switch list required. I stayed off the radio, unless the call had nothing to do with Track 7. The sealed boxcar remained in the cut. 4 cars from the head end now, dark and ordinary, if you did not know what it had cost to let it stand there. At 3:58 a.m., I walked the side of the cut one last time and heard a voice from inside the sealed car. Quiet enough, I might have missed it in warmer weather. It was the dead brakeman again. Same young, careful tone as before. He said, "Nate, check the rear brake line." For one awful second, that sounded like the most responsible thing anyone in the yard had said all night. I kept walking. By 4:31 a.m., the road crew lanterns were coming toward Track 7 through the Montana dark. The road crew came in from the north side of the yard with lanterns swinging low and steam from their breath showing in the light. 2 men, both tired, both moving with that flat last hour focus railroad work gives you before daylight. Neither of them looked at the sealed boxcar twice. That bothered me almost as much as if they had stared. It sat 4 cars from the head end on Track 7, plain as any other freight car in the cut, unless you knew the number and the history and the way it kept changing tracks without being switched. Harlan met the crew at the lead and handled the talk himself. Normal language only. Listed cars only. Brake test, paperwork, route, signal, departure. He never once gave the sealed car a shape in words. That was the whole strategy now. Not denial, not bravery. Refusal. Do not name it into movement. Do not correct it into reality. Let the cut leave with only the cars the yard was willing to admit it had. I stayed off to the side with my notebook in my inside pocket and watched the hand signals, the lantern sweeps, the little habits that make rail work look simple from a distance and deadly from close up. The outbound cut took its air slow. Couplers stretched. Slack came in one clank at a time. Somewhere down the line, a brake let off with a tired breath. The sealed boxcar stood there among the others, like it had every right to be coupled in. At 4:39 a.m., one of the crewmen walked the cut with a flashlight, checking the visible list against what he expected to see before departure. When his light crossed the sealed car, it did not pause. That was the strangest thing. Either he did not see what I saw, or the car only asked to be fully seen by men already tied to it. The knocks came once from inside, while his beam was on the door. He kept walking. No change in pace, no turn of the head, nothing. Harlan looked at me after that, and gave the smallest shake of his head. Not warning, not comfort, just a reminder. Let it go. I understood the point, but understanding and obeying are not the same thing when guilt is involved. Every part of my old bad instinct was awake by then. A car with unknown movement, unknown contents, bad brake history, and no paperwork should not leave a yard. That was true in every sane railroad world. The trouble was that this yard had spent 4 nights teaching me the limits of sane railroad thinking after midnight. If I stepped in now, if I tried to protect somebody by doing the responsible thing the familiar way, I would be giving the sealed car exactly what it had wanted since it first showed up. Witness, correction, handling, voice. I kept both hands busy instead, one on the radio I was not using, one inside my coat touching the notebook through the fabric like proof I could still choose written facts over instinct. At 4:43 a.m., the service track horn sounded again, one low blast from out in the dark, soft enough that only the yard really heard it. I froze where I was and kept my eyes down, the rule now buried deep enough to feel older than thought. The road crew did not react at all. Either they had not heard it, or it was not for them. Under the horn, I heard another sound, closer and more dangerous to me. 3 knocks from inside the sealed boxcar, then a pause, then one more. A different pattern, not marking time now, asking. Then the dead brakeman's voice came through the dark from somewhere near the cut, low and practical and tired. "Nate, you need to stop this one." He had sounded exactly like that on the night he died, not frightened, just trusting the older man nearby to make the safer call. My throat tightened hard enough to hurt. I did not look up. I did not answer. When the horn faded, the yard went still again, except for the slow breathing of air through the train line. The departure came together all at once after that, the way rail movement often does. A hand signal, a radio acknowledgement for the listed cut only, a gentle take of slack, then steel beginning to move with more confidence than seemed fair. Track 7 started rolling north out of the yard. The lead cars passed first, then the middle, then the sealed boxcar coming through the light with the same dark scraped side and the same unbroken seal. For 1 second, the door seam caught the yard lamp in a thin silver line, and I saw fresh frost broken along the edge at shoulder height from the inside. Not a lot, just enough to look like something warm had leaned there. The knocks did not come again. The car rolled by quiet as any other freight. I kept my mouth shut and my eyes on the side ladder until it passed beyond the brightest light. Then the rest of the cut followed. Ordinary cars, ordinary steel, ordinary departure rhythm. The only wrong thing about it was how cleanly it all happened. We watched the train clear the yard limit and head toward the first signal. From where we stood, you could count the cars by marker light gaps and movement if you had done it long enough. Harlan did not count aloud. Neither did I. We just watched the shape of the cut pull north into the dark Montana morning. Somewhere beyond the yard, just past where the lead should have reached the signal curve, the whole train seemed to settle smaller, not visibly shorter in a way you could swear to in court, just wrong in the way practiced eyes feel before they explain. Harlan lowered the binoculars he had raised without my noticing, and said the same thing he might have said about weather, one less past the signal. I looked at him. He looked back once and nodded. That was it. No celebration, no relief. The yard had let the extra car leave in the only way it ever seemed willing to accept, without being named into the movement by us first. Daylight did not make me feel better. It only made the yard look more ordinary, which in some ways was harder to trust. By 6:20 a.m., the tracks were gray instead of black. The locomotives looked like machines again instead of shapes, and the office coffee tasted even worse than it had before sunrise. Harlan locked the copied incident pages back into the drawer and told me I had 2 options now: stay on nights and learn how not to be useful to the yard, or leave before it built itself any closer around my habits. I asked what he would do in my place. He said he had already made the wrong choice once, which was why he was still there. Men like him rarely explain themselves fully, but that sentence told me enough. I finished the shift, turned in my radio, and said I would think about it. What I really meant was that I already knew. There are jobs you leave because they are too hard. Then there are jobs you leave because they have learned your name. I drove out of Montana that afternoon with my duffel on the seat and the square of paper with the boxcar number folded into my wallet behind my license. I told myself twice before the state line that I should throw it away. I did not. Same reason I had kept the notebook. Men who have failed once around steel become superstitious about records, even when they know records are not the same thing as control. For a few weeks after that, I stayed away from rail work entirely. Small repair jobs, loading docks, one stretch helping a cousin outside Billings with equipment maintenance that never involved tracks. I slept better than I had in a year, which should have warned me. Bad nights do not always follow you as nightmares. Sometimes they let you rest first, so you will start trusting routine again. Routine is where habits live, and habits are what places like that yard know how to use better than fear. A month later, I was outside a small freight spur near Casper, Wyoming, doing brake work on a grain loader that had nothing to do with yard operations. It was just after 5:10 a.m., cold enough to sting the lungs, first light not fully up yet. The spur only held 3 cars that morning, all covered hoppers, all listed, all ordinary. I had almost finished the job when I heard a soft metal knock from farther down the service track. Not loud, not a coupler hit. 3 even knocks at about chest height. My hands stopped moving before the wrench did. I turned slowly and looked past the loader toward the far end of the spur. Standing alone, beyond the listed hoppers, was a sealed dark boxcar with old scrape marks near the door and frost broken along the seam from the inside at shoulder height. No engine nearby, no reason for it to be there, no paperwork for it on the local list. My first thought was not fear. It was that Harlan had been right about one thing. If I ever saw the same number at another yard, I should not call it coincidence. I did not walk down to it. I did not call the number in. I did not open my mouth at all. I wiped my hand, put the wrench back in the bag, and went to my truck by the long way around, so I would not have to pass between any standing cars I had not personally seen stop. That was the other thing Harlan had been right about. Once a place like that teaches you the correct form of refusal, you keep it. Halfway to the truck, I heard the horn of a locomotive from somewhere beyond the loading road, low and long in the cold before sunrise. I kept my eyes down and kept walking. Behind me, from the sealed car on the spur, came 3 slow knocks through steel. Then my own voice, calm and tired, and close enough to feel real, said the sentence I had once used to excuse a bad decision. It will hold. I did not turn around. I got in the truck and drove until full daylight, and since then I have treated every unlisted freight car the same way. If the paperwork says empty track, I believe the paperwork only until the steel gives me a reason not to.